Well, hi and welcome to the Season 1 finale of the Viewfinders Photography Podcast. I'm your host, Graham Dargy, and today I have a very inspirational chat with award-winning travel and documentary photographer Brian Hodges. I'm really excited to share this episode, and I'll introduce you to Brian in a minute. But first, I wanted to take a second to just acknowledge that this is the final episode of the first season, and it's been an amazing journey for me. I just had the initial idea to do a podcast. Well, initially I had an idea to do a podcast a couple of years ago, and I never really followed it through. And with the strange year that we've had in 2020, I just kind of needed something to do. So I give myself this project to do, and while things were a little bit quiet in this strange year. And it's been a big learning curve. I had a lot of work to get it off the ground. And I have to mention a friend of mine, Bob Gentle, who has a digital marketing podcast called Amplify. Bob gave me some great advice and just the nudge that I needed to go ahead and do the podcast. So from that initial idea to here, now having 10 episodes out there with amazing photographers from around the world, I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great adventure for me. And so I want to thank each of my guests: Audrey Woolard, Mark McCall, Donna Krause, Craig Fraser, Julian Terreros Martin, Valda Bailey, Nick Tucker, Osborne Masharia, John Clark, and today's guest Brian Hodges for their time and their input into the podcast. Hopefully we've created something great that you enjoy listening to, and the feedback certainly has been very positive and very rewarding to see all the reviews and the comments that we've gotten. So really appreciate it. We're already working hard on season 2, and I've got some great episodes already in the can. So I'll be launching season 2 in January sometime. If you've enjoyed this season, why not share the podcast with your photography friends? And I would love to connect with you. You can find me on social media, Instagram, YouTube and Facebook. I'd love to see the photography you've been up to, and drop me a line to let me know that you listen to the show too. Mostly, I want to thank the hundreds of listeners who have downloaded the show. When you put something like this together, I didn't know, how many listeners I would get. I had no frame of reference for that. So anything was going to be positive. But the one thing I kind of thought to myself was, it has to be more than 7. If I do all this work and I get 7 listeners, I'll just be a bit depressed. So I don't know why 7 was the magic number for me, but without going into specifics, I can tell you that each episode has far exceeded 7 listeners. So thanks to each of you for giving your time and attention to the show. Really appreciate it. And look forward to more in season 2. I've got some great guests. I'm going to continue to work on my presenting and my interview skills, and hopefully continue to make better and better shows for you to enjoy well into next year. So now is the time to introduce this week's guest, Brian Hodges. Brian Hodges is a travel and documentary photographer based in New South Wales, Australia. Brian's mission to explore the world outside his comfort zone has led him to 60 countries around the world, and his photography, which I described to my wife as heart-achingly beautiful, just won him the 2020 IPA People Photographer of the Year award. That's a big deal. Our conversation covers how Brian went from designing satellite telecommunication systems in Paris to photographing tribesmen in Papua New Guinea, raising his kids on the road, and how a chance conversation with a doctor in America ended up saving the life of a child he'd previously photographed in Uganda. It's an inspiring story. I'm sure you're going to take lots away from this, and it's my pleasure to introduce my conversation with Brian Hodges. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. Good morning from Australia.
I've never talked to anyone as far away from myself as this. I don't know how far it is exactly, but I'm in Scotland, you're in Australia. It's pretty exciting that we can do this.
It's extraordinary, and there's very little delay in the connection.
Yeah. For people who might not know you, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your photography?
Sure. My name is Brian Hodges. I've been practicing photography for about 20 years. Prior to that, I was a telecommunications software engineer. And I think that informs my approach to photography in many ways. I like to call myself a documentary travel photographer. I'm very driven by portrait work, and recently I've been doing a lot of work in Africa, specifically Uganda. I have a long-term project I'm working on there. Um, Portraiture and travel photography is really what I focus on.
Hmm. Well, I discovered your work quite recently. I was just saying before we recorded, and I just loved it. I loved the way you photograph people from different places. Some people who probably have challenges that most of us can't really understand, but you shoot these people with such dignity and strength. And I love that. I really appreciate that.
Thank
And
you.
the other thing that got me when I dig deeper into your website, there's the work that I've sort of described there, but then I found this interiors photography, which I really didn't expect, and then the sort of editorial portraits of business people and so on. That really gets my attention because when you're shooting different kinds of things to a really high standard, that I think that's it's really good. So, congratulations for that. I just thought it was amazing work, and I was really keen to talk to you. Let's go back in time. You just said that you have a satellite communications background. I was curious as to what kind of career that was, and how one thing led to photography, which seems like a completely different thing. What happened there?
Well, I think there is something that probably connects my former life as an engineer to what I'm doing now in photography, and that is curiosity. At my core, I'm a really curious person. I want to know how things work. I want to know how people think. I want to have a deeper understanding of the world. At times, it's a curse. I can't prevent myself from going down rabbit holes, but the bottom line, that is what drives me. So from a very early age, I had a desire to understand how things worked. I would often dismantle the toys that people gave me, dismantle
Mm,
things, lots of tinkering. And that eventually led to my studies in electrical and computer engineering. And I did that in Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. I'm from California originally.
mm,
And after receiving that degree, part of me felt like I still didn't have the education that I dreamt of. In particular, I felt somewhat lacking in languages. I wanted to pick up another language. I ended up buying a one-way ticket to France, to Paris, France, with the half-cooked idea of finding a quick job, becoming a waiter, whatever, and perhaps spending a summer. Um, Once I got there, I realized that first of all, the idea of becoming a waiter was a foolish idea. French waiters in Paris are career professionals, and
mm,
that was certainly out of my league. But I discovered that there were job opportunities in my field of study, software engineering, and ended up thinking I would stay for a summer, but stayed for 10 years.
mm,
I went back to university in France, got a master's degree, um, became proficient in the language, obviously, which was my first goal. But
mm,
more importantly, I think became multicultural. I learned what it was like to be French. And
mm,
in the end, I think that's even more important than becoming multilingual. So that really expanded my perspective on the world and people. And all the while I was writing software code, I had this aesthetic that I wanted to express. And I remember distinctly aligning my code that really no one sees because it's compiled and turns into a program. But I was very careful about the visual arrangement and alignment of my code. That meant something to me, and I had
mm,
this inner aesthetic that I wanted to express, and software code is probably not the best vehicle to express that.
mm,
Um, But I practiced telecommunications engineering for 15 years. Ended up writing satellite software to communicate with vehicles. So really went deep into that and had a wonderful career that took me around the world. Uh, the whole time I was indifferent to photography and really hadn't discovered it. Um, and then I ended up meeting a French woman, starting a family, getting married, and realized that raising a family was incompatible with my intense career, and took a pretty sharp turn away from my technology career and focused on my family and more of a lifestyle that I wanted my children to know. And then that slowly turned into photography, which is a whole nother story, but I'll let you intervene if you have any other questions.
Yeah, well, I was curious to know, obviously, when photography came on your radar then.
Hmm. Well, children and travel were strong drivers. We traveled a lot, and I felt compelled to document my children. It just was fun, coupled with our journeys. We ended up moving back to California and remodeling an old house, mostly on our own, and had fun doing that. There was a magazine, the local magazine, Santa Barbara Magazine, learned of our house and our lifestyle, and they said, we would love to document you and feature you in our magazine. And both my wife and I decided that we really didn't want that invasion of our privacy. The idea of being featured in a magazine didn't appeal to us, and we said no. But then I thought about it for a while, and I said, well, what if I were to take the pictures and really do this story as we see it from inside, and not have someone document us? And at the time, I had some good friends that were studying at the Brooks Institute of Photography in Santa Barbara, which used to be one of the premier photographic schools. And my main interest in cameras was actually the devices themselves.
Mm,
I was fascinated by the camera and the mechanical aspects of it,
mm,
and really wanted to take them apart. I remember my friend had a Mamiya RZ, and I loved holding this machine in my hands. And I was kind of indifferent as to what photographs might come out of it, but wanted
mm,
to examine it deeper and take it apart. So strangely, the camera, the device itself, pulled me into photography.
mm,
Santa Barbara Magazine saw a few photographs that I had on the refrigerator, and I went back to them and said, "Well, would you consider allowing me to photograph this job, um, to be featured in the magazine?" And graciously, they said, "Yes, give it a try."
mm,
So I ended up buying a camera. I bought an RZ. I went straight into medium format film from zero, and
mm,
essentially spent a whole summer teaching myself how to take pictures.
mm,
Um, and again, I had this internal aesthetic. I knew what I wanted. I just didn't have the skills to capture it yet. And
mm,
I paid great attention and focused my energies on creating the images I want, and ended up shooting my family, essentially shooting my house and my family with my lovely camera, and felt pretty satisfied with the results.
mm,
Ultimately, they were published, and it was very well received. The magazine loved the work, and that was really the beginning of a photography career.
mm,
They assigned me to other jobs after that, and things unfolded very organically.
mm. So that's great. So you just kind of fell into it from there. That's amazing.
Hmm.
And so what year was that roughly?
I want to say 2002 or three.
Okay, so okay, a good while back now.
Hmm.
Um, and so okay, so from there, I was just to go back slightly. I just thought going from your previous career to being a photographer. It's like going from something very secure to something very insecure.
Yeah.
Was that a hurdle for you at all, or I mean, you said that the previous work was quite stressful or quite full on. So how did you? I mean, how did you
Hmm.
make that step?
It was a hurdle. I guess I had some practice having previously uprooted all of my stability and moving to France.
Mm,
That was an immensely challenging period for me, moving to a new country, learning a new language, and getting a feel for what life is like without any security or known reference points, if you will.
mm,
So perhaps that primed me for what many people would consider dramatic lifestyle changes. I slowly tapered out of technology. I consulted for a while. Um, my wife is a very peripatetic French gypsy woman, for lack of better description, and she was very much the driver to our extensive travels and the way we raised our children. Specifically, they were homeschooled while we
mhm,
traveled. Um, so of course that appealed to me to document these trips, to document my family. And I was able to slowly back out of my career through consulting. At that by that time, I had started a company in France. I sold the company, and the timing was opportune. I consulted for a while, and we ended up on a dilapidated sailboat in Panama, actually, and that was the beginning of my travel photography.
okay. Your life is way more exciting than my life. I'm just gonna put that out there. Um, so, okay, let's get back into your timeline. So now you started working for the magazine, maybe picking up some other assignments on the side.
Yeah.
How do you get into that sort of um, travel documentary stuff? Like I know you do some work with organizations like African Women Rising. How did you find your way to that kind of thing?
Well, I guess I'll back up. I'll continue the exotic travel stories. Again, following my passion, following my family, documenting our journey. We at one point we jumped in our car when my daughter was 2 months old and drove from California to Panama. I documented that along the way. And then at a later stage, we ended up in Brazil, buying a car there and driving around for two separate 3-month trips. And again, I'm taking pictures the whole time. The Brazil trip I shared with a friend of mine who worked with Vogue magazine in Spain, and she said these are amazing. Let me show them to my colleagues at Condé Nast Traveler upstairs. They saw my pictures and said, "Great, we'd love to publish these photographs of your family's journey."
Mm.
So again, it was very fortuitous the way things lined up. It wasn't a clearly hatched idea of mine to publish pictures in Condé Nast Traveler magazine, but
Mm.
really the content and the timing that allowed that to happen.
The project you're talking about, or I'm calling it a project, when you were in
Hmm.
Brazil, those pictures are on your website as a project, right?
I believe they are still on my website.
I'll put the link
Yeah,
in the show notes for people who
yeah,
want to see
yeah.
that.
Hmm.
Um, okay, cool. So how did you find your way to Australia then?
Again, having had practice moving to France, we also ended up spending about 15 years in Mexico on and off. Um, Mexico is approximately next door to California, and we ended up finding a little village there in the jungle and uh, rebuilding an old home, and that was our kind of parallel existence to California.
Mm.
A lot of this is driven by surf, by the way. That's the common denominator not between France, although there is great surf there, but California, Australia, Mexico, and Brazil were largely driven by this pursuit to find waves and
Mm.
good surf. So Australia was again kind of born out of this idea of I guess discomfort with complacency. We had a home, we had everything that most people aspire to in California,
Mm.
and yet it somehow felt a little too comfortable and easy, having grown up there and spent many years there. So both my wife and I kind of seek out adventure and change. We had previously traveled to Australia about 15 years ago. The common mode of travel here is to buy a van or something and
Mhm.
drive the East Coast and spend a month or two. It's such a huge country. That's the most practical way to travel. So we in fact did that with our family. We bought an old van for $600 and made a bed in the back and drove up and down the coast of Australia for a few months and kind of
Mm.
explored it. And 15 years later, we ended up coming back. We sold our house in California and ended up on a farm here behind Byron Bay in the hinterland.
It sounds pretty cool. We follow these tiny house videos on YouTube. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Um, and so there's a lot in Australia and New Zealand, and we just think that life looks really. I don't think you could really do it here in the same way because it's much colder and rainier. But if you have that outdoor kind of space, it seems like a great way to go at it.
Absolutely. Well, when we came here, we bought this piece of land that had a dilapidated house on it that we had to tear down, and we ended up living in a tent for 2 years.
Mm.
And we set up a really cool tent. It's not your average Boy Scout tent. We found a safari tent,
Mm-hmm.
6 by 4 meters, and erected that on a creek, and really had a lovely 2 years living in a tent in one rectangle. It was
Mm.
just lovely. We've since built a home, and I'm on the same property, and I really miss being in the tent, to be honest with you.
How old were the kids at the time when you were living in the tent?
Right. So the kids are now grown. My wife and I lived in the tent alone, and we actually built two tents. The second tent was for my grown son and his partner. My other son lived in in this little microstructure that we built elsewhere on the property, about 10 square meters. With a bed. And having grown up traveling and on the road, my youngest son, who is now 20, is not particularly attached to possessions. So he really didn't need much more than 10 square meters in a bed.
Mm.
So we've learned through our travels how to live minimally.
Okay, this could become a completely different podcast, but let's
Yeah.
go back to photography. I'm really, really interested in that. I've lived in the same town my whole life, and so it's
Hmm.
I really admire that you've been able to do that. It sounds really exciting. So I want to talk about some of your projects, and the first one I wanted to talk or ask you about is, and I'm not going to say this correctly, but it's Odilo Lawina. We'll we'll try again. Odilo Lawini.
Sure, that sounds great. In fact, I don't think I can pronounce it any better than you can. That is a Choli language, which is the language spoken by about 1 million people in northern Uganda and South Sudan. Um,
Mm.
and it means ball of scrap or something to that effect, loosely translated.
Mhm.
I have been working with a, a, a NGO in northern Uganda for the past 4 years. It's a charitable organization called African Women Rising, and usually spend 2 weeks a year there, contributing my time pro bono to their projects. and these images are used for fundraising eventually. So that's how the organization benefits. Um, this work allows me great access to areas that I would never be able to see if I were just a tourist. And it's really opened many doors. And then in the course of these travels, I noticed that the kids have this tradition of making soccer balls from scrap materials, plastic bags, banana leaves, an old piece of tire, mosquito netting, and they weave these things together into a perfectly spherical ball that works as a soccer ball or a football, and have just as much fun as any kid playing with the latest Nike ball, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm.
And these balls are really beautiful creations. Each one, of course, is unique. And I think they kind of reflect the character of the person that made them, and of course, the materials that were available. And I really had the desire to highlight the beauty of these objects as sculptures, and couple that with my portraiture. And so I came up with the idea of using a field studio, which is something I often do, essentially creating my backdrop and light in the bush. And I photographed the balls as objects, and then the person that made the ball as a separate frame, and assembled them into a diptych. So I have a series that I made from these images, and they've been really well received. I'm quite shocked to see the impact these images have had. They're currently on display at Photo Israel and across the US in Photoville Fence. I just won the IPA awards for this series as well. So it's been very well received.
It's quite a big deal, that kind of award, I think, isn't it? I know one of the other photographers who won one is a bit of a beast, actually. It's a guy I followed for a long time called Howard Schatz.
Yes, of
And
course.
so it's a big deal. So congratulations for that. But so I was really curious, because I know this is noted as a personal project, but I also know you'd been in Uganda as well. So was it something that you just observed while you were there doing a different project, and then you picked it up as an idea?
It was. So the work for this charity organization, as the name might indicate, involves mostly women, women that are benefiting from the education and microfinance training that they're providing. And so the balls and the kids that made the balls are not directly connected to their area of interest. Something I did on the side while I was there.
How did it come together where you saw the kids playing with the balls? How the idea became a story for you? Did you have like an instinct for that kind of storytelling?
Yeah, so I had previously photographed kids holding these balls in environmental portraits, and was really satisfied with the images. But on a subsequent trip, wanted to dig deeper into the real artistry of these balls, and somehow communicate that. And I think before leaving on my trip, I noticed an article in the New York Times um, where I believe it was a baseball player and his playing mitt displayed as a diptych, and
Mm.
the idea really struck me as appropriate for documenting these balls. And I essentially borrowed the idea, although the concept of a diptych is obviously well known in photography, but thought that would be an appropriate method to really convey both the ball maker and the ball in the same image.
It's really well done. And I was going to ask you about the field studio anyway, but so where did you set up this field studio, and what can you tell us about the field studio?
So the images in this series were shot over three separate locations in schools, essentially. And we set up in a classroom. In this case, field studio is probably not the best term. I set up a simple backdrop in a classroom, and lit it with a strobe as well. I had my camera on a tripod, suspended the ball with a string in front of a backdrop,
Mm.
and photographed it. Did the same for the kid. The backdrop was pretty messy. I wasn't terribly satisfied with that result when I got home, so I ended up substituting it for a homogeneous backdrop in post,
Hmm.
to complete the series.
Just for clarity, you didn't suspend the kids on a string like you did the ball. Just wanted to
Just the
clear that
falls
up.
were on a string, yeah, yeah.
Okay. It's so amazing, and my wife comes from Kenya, and I feel
Hmm.
like I've you were saying you get to places that you wouldn't get to as a tourist, and I know what you mean, and I recognize these people in the Uganda one as well because it's a neighboring country. It's so evocative, and you get into these places and you meet these people, and they're just amazing people, and I love to see them photographed with such dignity. I know I said it before, rather than as people to feel sorry for or so on. But so I'm really keen on that project.
Thank you.
So let me ask you, if I can, to segue about Sing Sing. What can you tell us about that project?
Hmm. Um, Sing Sing follows a project I shot in India, um, of sadhus, in Rajasthan, and I mentioned that because they both involve a field studio, and having shot a few editorial jobs for Santa Barbara Magazine, uh, I felt like I kind of had a name and I was growing, but I wasn't really sure if I, again, like if I had the skills and the depth of work that I really aspired to, and decided to travel to India and with my wife and take some pictures. I'll get back to Sing Sing, but we'll start in India.
Hmm.
And this is at the Pushkar Camel Fair, and it's been photographed many times. It's a riot of activity, and there's camels and dust and tourists and sadhus, and it was a little bit too much visual information for me. I guess I have kind of a reductive aesthetic, and I think that comes from my engineering background somehow. This need to classify and simplify.
Mm.
So in India, I was very frustrated by my inability to really capture the beauty of these subjects in this very complex visual environment. So I ended up buying a piece of fabric and finding some bamboo poles and string and essentially creating a daylight field studio.
Mm.
Photographed my subjects and was really ecstatic about the results. It was the first time I had done that. Fast forward to the Sing Sing project in Papua New Guinea. Uh, Again, I wasn't really sure if my previous project in Rajasthan was born out of good luck, or if I was really as talented as I thought the images
Mm.
looked. I kind of wanted to prove the fact that I could do it twice. And
Mm.
I went to Papua New Guinea, again, personal project with my wife. Um, we were poorly informed and probably pretty naive about the whole venture, but ended up on the ground in Port Moresby, the capital of Papua New Guinea, and set out without any real clear plans to document these celebrations called Sing Sings. This time, rather than buying the fabric on site, I brought my backdrop with me. I brought light stands. I brought some empty sandbags that you fill with rocks or whatever to work
Mm.
as sandbags. And I had my setup much more dialed in. So we ended up at these celebrations where the Papuans essentially are all in their full tribal regalia and compete. It's a sort of a beauty contest, for lack of better terms.
Mm,
It's a judged competition amongst the Papuans to see what tribe is best represented. And of course, they are eager to be seen, and they're quite happy to be photographed.
mm,
And it was very happy that I brought my backdrop. Again, it was visually quite complex and chaotic, and I felt these subjects were so majestic that they would really benefit from separation with the backdrop. Um, One funny story, I set up my light stand with the sandbags, and inevitably a crowd of people gathers around these stages.
mm.
Um, and I felt every bit as exotic as these people probably felt to me. I think they were looking at us like we came from Mars and vice versa.
Mm.
At one point, I'm photographing someone against the backdrop, and the whole set collapses. It fell over, and the light stands fell in. And we went to pick up the pieces. It turns out someone had stolen the sandbags. So evidently they thought those were of great value, and someone picked up the sandbags, which was pretty funny. If we were deep in the bush, I couldn't imagine what purpose a sandbag might have for anyone there,
I don't know.
but
Maybe they had a photography business. I don't know.
yeah, exactly. But those pictures, again, it was a personal project, but they were subsequently published in Geo magazine in Germany, several magazine covers, publications, and awards grew out of that project.
They're just amazing pictures, and obviously, the guys in the pictures look incredible with their traditional clothing on and so on, and the paint. But what got me was just the level of connection. You know how someone can be there, but they're not really there. But their people in the
Hmm.
shots are really
Hmm.
connected, and doing that presumably through a language barrier. I think it's amazing, really. So, can you speak to how you achieve that?
It's a really good question, and others have pointed that out as well. Um, And as you say, there was definitely a language barrier. Often that is the case with my subjects. So I resort to communicating with my eyes, with gestures, with empathy and curiosity. I'm genuinely interested in these people I'm photographing, and I imagine that they perceive that somehow. That's the
Mm,
only thing I can ascribe this connection to.
mm,
And often I will work with a translator, and I've had this in the past. I'll say, well, have the subject turn to the left a little bit, or we need him to raise his chin a little, and the translator will say this, or eventually the translator will just go to the person and grab their shoulders and twist them and move them around
mm.
like a mannequin. And I learned I could do that myself. It's kind of funny. I can walk up to people with whom I can't share one word in a common language, and I've learned that with appropriate visual connection and emotional connection, I can twist them and move them and get them to position as needed. And we all end up laughing at the end. I think humor is an important element.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of connecting with people, and it's that sort of universal, isn't it? So just to round up on this, so you and your wife just went there. You've got your kit with you. You're going to get those shots with the field studio. That was your goal on that trip.
Yeah, that's right. We flew to Australia from California. We flew to Brisbane, and then there's a quick airport transfer in Brisbane to Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. At the airport in Australia, we were queued up with fellow passengers, and people were looking at us and asking, "Well, are you really prepared to go to Papua New Guinea?" Um, it has this reputation of being extremely dangerous. There are allegedly tribes of hooligans in the streets that are violent, and everyone was really concerned about our safety and importantly our lack of preparation in that respect. Um, when we got there, a Papuan on the airplane said, "Well, look, I'll give you a ride to a hotel. That way, you won't have to deal with the taxis that can also be dangerous." So there was this notion of danger that everyone was describing. That again, maybe through total naivete, we were able to avoid. Maybe we're just trusting and open, and that's perceived by others. It's hard for me to really describe, but the only issue we had again was someone stole a sandbag,
Mm.
which is certainly not a problem. But
Yeah.
we ended up flying in on a small Cessna airplane to a remote village called Simbai. We landed on a dirt airstrip, and the pilot agreed to return 3 days later to pick us up. And we get out of the airplane on the grass, and the locals start appearing to greet us. They greet the airplane because it has supplies. It brings in rice and a few things. And there was this elaborate procession of people with drums and in full regalia that greeted us. From the walk from the airstrip to the village, it's about 2 kilometers. And for the whole distance, it was lined with people applauding our arrival, giving us flowers, beating drums. The whole thing was surreal. We ended
Mm.
up eventually meeting the tribal the chief, and he greeted us and was very warm. And he said, "Is this all the people in your group?" And we said, "Well, yeah, this is my wife and I." And he said, "Well, we thought that there would be more of you." And it turns out that they were expecting a television crew from the state television channel, and they thought that's who we were. They must they
Ah,
mistook
okay.
us for this crew. So we got the full reception accidentally.
That's amazing. What an amazing experience. I wonder if, people you'd been warned that it was going to be dangerous and you found it wasn't so bad. You're obviously quite experienced at traveling. You've met people from all over. Um, there's that comfort of just being able to be there and be comfortable and bring that okayness with it yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like I find when I'm in Kenya, when I tell people that my wife's a Kenyan, everybody sort of relaxes,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I'm really taken in and welcomed in, and it's like you're one of the crew. But I just wonder if that because you have that travel experience, you just sort of naturally carry a comfort with being around different kinds of people.
I think that's very well put, and I would agree. I've traveled to about 65 countries now, uh, and yeah, would consider myself well traveled. So in the end, I think fear breeds fear, and compassion breeds compassion.
Mm. Yeah.
But never underestimate the stupidity of a large crowd. That's one thing I've discovered. But the individual is always we're all the same family. That's how I see it.
Mm. Let me ask you about one more project before we start to move on. And it's the Northern Uganda one. It jumped out at me because of, again, my connection to Africa, but I love these ones. I really like these ones. There's a shot with it looks like a family outside a sort of traditional home, and the lady's got like a farming kind of tool, and there's some other family members behind. Um,
Hmm.
I love that shot, and then there's the shot of the landmines. Be aware of the landmines sign. Um, it's just great. It's great. But there's a shot I think from this project with a kid looking at a blackboard, I think. But there's somebody's arm is going over the top. That one I love that shot. So what can you tell us about the Northern Uganda project?
Hmm. So again, all these shots are connected with the charity organization African Women Rising, um, and I like to add perhaps unexpected levels of production to my images. There was a brief moment in my career when I worked as a commercial photographer in Los Angeles. We skipped over that, but I became very comfortable with studio lighting, medium format cameras, and higher levels of production than one would typically imagine for travel documentary photography.
Mm.
So the first shot you mentioned, the woman standing in front of a traditional hut, that's with a medium format, like a S and a strobe. So I think these images stand out because of the subtle production quality
Mm.
that's brought in by the tools I use. The chalkboard image in particular has been really well received. Again, that image just won a big award in Australia. I'm really grateful to have received that.
Mm.
We were in a classroom documenting students and tutors. And it's a scene that I've been in many times in Uganda, and I've noticed that often those pictures turn out looking to be the same. I really wanted to incorporate an additional element in this shot, and was hoping to get a foreground element and kind of shooting through people and under things, and really just was quite fortuitous and had this moment of when the teacher is passing a piece of chalk to another student in the foreground while a student is writing at the board, and it formed a frame, giving a foreground element that really makes the image successful.
Mm. It's really terrific. I was curious, when you get to a place like that to shoot a project, do you just sort of throw yourself in and start shooting, or do you pause for a moment and observe things before you get stuck in? What's your kind of approach when you get on the ground like that?
I take a minute and look around. I kind of have this feeling that I can't articulate clearly, but oftentimes I will stand in a location and I will feel that there was a photograph somewhere to be made there, and it just feels visually rich and compelling. And it often takes me a few minutes to understand how to make the photograph that fully depicts what I'm sensing internally. So I go off of this feeling. It's a little alarm bell that says, "Hey, stop for a second. There's an image here. Figure it out." Maybe it means come back the next day when the light's right, or
Mm.
when the elements align. But I really enjoy slowing the process down. Um, I have kind of I have two styles of shooting, and they're dictated by my equipment choice, really. Um, I mentioned I shoot medium format. I like to use a tripod. I really enjoy the deliberate act of making a portrait that way.
Mm.
I find that the subject often becomes bored, for lack of better terms, by me setting up all my kit, and they end up relaxing, and I think
Mm.
that's apparent in the shot. And on the other side, I like to shoot with a Leica Q, which is a small mirrorless fixed 28 millimeter full frame camera. Um, and that's really my go-to camera these days. The shot you mentioned with the chalkboard was shot with a Leica Q. I typically don't light when I have that camera. I feel quite quick and nimble, and it's really an extension of how I think.
That's great. You've just answered my next couple of questions, which were going to be about your gear. So, and it's interesting then that the camera sort of speaks to the type of photography that you'll do, or vice versa, to the tool that you'll choose. Okay, so what else comes with you in your bag? You've got the cameras. Would you take, the medium format? Would you take both types of cameras to any location, or would you just pack light for going to, say, Uganda or one of these kind of far flung places?
Yeah, that's always a tricky question. I will spend weeks preparing my kit prior to getting on an airplane.
Mm,
In fact, another trip I have for traveling is to pack my luggage, not only my camera gear but my clothing, and live out of my luggage for a week before leaving, just to make sure I didn't forget the obvious things.
mm,
And I kind of quarantine myself to the stuff that I intend to take.
mm,
But as far as camera gear on my trips, I typically bring two Pelican boxes, the 1510 roller cases that fit. In the old days, they would fit in aircraft overhead bins. Nowadays, the 7 kilo weight restriction often prevents that. But
mm,
on one case, I carry my lighting, and the other case, I carry my cameras. Um, and then when I'm in the field, I will often remove the elements that I really need for that particular day and put them in a small canvas shoulder bag.
mm.
Or if I'm lucky, we'll have a car and I can bring both Pelican cases in the car and use that as my staging ground, if you will.
What kind of strobe is it that you take with you?
I use Profoto B10.
Okay, that's coming up a lot. It's obviously got a really good reputation.
Yeah, yeah. I enjoy it. It's lightweight. Does exactly what I need.
Brilliant. Okay, let's move on a little bit. And I've got a special round here called double exposure. And
Hmm.
I just going to pick a shot of yours to ask you about, although I've already asked you about a few, but there's one particular shot I wanted to ask you about. And then maybe there's a shot or a moment or an experience in your career that you could talk to that's been really outstanding and memorable. So the one I wanted to ask you about, I'm really asking this for my 4-year-old daughter because she thought this shot was hilarious. And there's a shot from the Uganda project where there's two kids, I guess they're twins, and they're breastfeeding at the same time
Mm.
on the mum. What can you tell us about that shot?
Yeah, that's there's actually quite a story behind that image. It's not uncommon to see breastfeeding mothers in Uganda and in Africa, and it's not
Mm,
uncommon to have twins. I learned the other day that mammals typically have typical litter size is it twice the number of teats or half the number of teats, something to that effect. But there's a correlation between the teats on the animal and the litter size. And
okay.
so human beings are built to feed two babies at the same time, and that's clearly what this woman is
Mm,
doing simultaneously. They're twins.
mm,
Um, One of them, they both look like their cheeks are full and they're plump little healthy babies. But sadly, it turns out that one of them actually had a rare form of cancer that created this. There was a tumor, in fact, in this child's cheek.
mm,
Um, and I only discovered that it was quite strange. So I took this photograph. We spoke to the mother was concerned, but really didn't know what to do, and none of the local doctors had any particularly uh, good information on the situation. Um, a month after taking this photograph, I'm back in California. I run into a doctor friend, and I said, "Hey, in fact, this doctor worked for an organization, a charity organization that treats children with this rare cancer disease in Africa." And I ended up putting A and B together. I'm certainly not a doctor, but I asked this man if by chance this I might have photographed a child with this rare form of cancer, and he confirmed that it exists and that's a possibility. So I ended up going back through the charity and providing this information, and we exceptionally made a unique case for this woman and provided her medical care for her child and got her to a hospital in the capital of Kampala. And just by accident of my running into this friend and learning about
mm,
this illness, were we able to kind of assemble the resources and the information to help this family out.
mm,
I went back a year later and photographed them, and the kids were not breastfeeding this time. But I have another image that I should probably pair with
mm.
the original. where they're standing at her side, and she has her hand on on the head of each child.
Mm.
And the one with the cancer was cured.
That is just incredible. I mean, how does that make you feel?
Well, I guess it's the power of photography, expressed
Mm.
in a really unexpected way. Makes me feel great.
That's amazing. I'd love to see that photo if you don't mind.
The
Um,
follow up,
um,
yeah,
yeah, that would be great.
happy to share.
Is that might you might have already answered the next question. If there was an amazing epic moment or amazing shot that really stands out for you, I don't think there's anything that can top that, is there?
That's I guess that's a really unique story insofar as someone's health was directly impacted by a photograph. Um,
Mm.
I think I'd have a hard time topping that, to be honest with you.
Mm. Okay, let's move on to the quick fire round, and we're getting near the end, Brian, because I know we're
Hmm.
going a little bit over time here. But okay, it's a quick fire round, so I'm just gonna bash through this. Okay, wide angle or telephoto?
Wide angle, 28 millimeters specifically.
Oh, okay, cool, very specific. Good. Head or heart?
Head.
Okay, what was the last great book, movie, series, or album you experienced?
Hmm. Gosh, I've got a whole bunch of great books I'm reading, and the stack of books beside my bed is tall, and I'm trying to narrow it down to one specific one because this is the quick fire round. I'm really on the spot. Um, oh, I'm totally striking out on this one, Graham. Yeah, you're gonna have to hit reset on this.
Pressure. Okay, pressure.
Pressure has got me on the favorite book.
Hmm. So let's move on. Would you use an expensive lens cloth or just the corner of your shirt?
Um, I am known to use the corner of my shirt, but if I have a lens cloth, I'd prefer that.
What's a weird thing I can find in your camera bag?
Mosquito repellent and sunscreen.
Yeah, you gotta have it. Okay, favorite photographer right now?
Right now, I anticipated you would ask a question like this, and I came up with a list of my photographic inspiration, and I can give you one name, or I can go
Hmm.
through a dozen. Nadav Konder is really someone whose work I admire greatly, and I had the great fortune of taking a workshop with him at the Palm Springs Photo Festival.
Okay, Nadav Khandar. We'll put the link in the show notes for
Hmm.
people. Okay, is there a dream location or project you'd love to photograph?
Yeah, I'm eager to return to Uganda. Right now, travel is not permitted from or to Australia, so I can't leave the country.
Mm.
Um, there's a project that I'm dreaming of would be following South Sudanese refugees that are currently in camps in Uganda, following them on their return trip home. There are more than
Mm.
1 million refugees in Uganda, and as security conditions improve in South Sudan, they will be returning to their homes. And
Mm.
documenting that would be a fascinating project.
Mm. My wife was just on the phone yesterday to a friend in South Sudan,
Hmm.
and he was a school friend, and she hasn't spoken to him since like 20 years ago. And so I think he's got one Kenyan parent and one Sudanese parent, and somehow his Kenyan paperwork isn't lined up, and
Hmm.
so he has to be in Sudan just now. So he's got kids, and it's there's he's saying there's shooting. It's dangerous. He goes out. He doesn't know if he's going to come back, but he's doing some
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
NGO work there.
I don't think it's quite time to return, but that project is definitely in my queue.
Well, I hope you can get to it. Okay, when do you feel at peace with the universe?
When I'm surfing, or maybe after doing yoga that I practice regularly as
Hmm.
well.
Cool. Okay, what's the future looking like for you? I know it's a bit tricky with the restrictions and so on at the moment, but where do you see things going photography wise in the next couple of years?
Um, I have a lot of activity this year in the form of festivals that unfortunately I haven't been able to attend. There's currently Israel, the United States. I have a show coming up at the Exposure Festival in Sharjah, which is in the United Arab Emirates. I'm very eager to go to that one in February, if possible. But I anticipate continued work on my project in Uganda. That really gives me great pleasure to know that my photographs are of humanitarian service, and it allows me to push my artistic boundaries as well.
Where can people go to connect with you, support your work, and find out more about what you do?
I have my website, brianhodgesphoto.com, as well as Instagram, Brian_Hodges on Instagram.
That's great. Brian, thank you for your time. We could have talked, well, I could have let you talk for much longer. The more I talk to you, there's more things being uncovered that are interesting to me, but our time is up. So thanks so much. I really appreciate you calling in from Australia. And sorry that I thought you were Australian. And,
no apologies needed. Really a pleasure speaking with you. I really enjoyed the conversation and happy to continue anytime you feel free.
Thanks for listening. Well, I hope you had a few takeaways from this episode. It just makes me want to have a much more exciting life than I really do. Follow Brian on Instagram and check out his website. Links to some of the other things we spoke about, as usual, are in the show notes. I would love to connect with you. Again, links for my social media are in the notes below the show, and you can check out the Viewfinder's website where you can find out all about what I do. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe on your favourite platform, and if you feel like it, you could leave a kind review. That really helps the show reach more people. And while you're there, why not check out some more episodes from season 1. Okay, enjoy photography. Have a great Christmas and New Year. Be kind, and I'll see you out there.